Okay, so let's start with today's session. We were in the first chapter and we read till 35th verse. Now we'll continue with the 36th, 36th verse. So what we read before was that yeah, so two parties, Arjuna and Duryodhan party, they have arrived at the war, and Arjuna charioteer is Lord Krishna, and Arjuna tells to Krishna that take me in the middle of the battlefield, let me see who all have come. Now after, in the middle of the battlefield, he starts seeing his grandfather, fatherly figures, same generation, brothers, cousins, sons, his own sons and sons of others too, Pautran, grandsons also. So basically he's seeing his whole family, but most of his family, extended family, is in the opposite side. So seeing that, this is a war and my family members are going to get killed, he feels very compassionate. And yeah, so he feels very compassionate, and he starts saying that why we should kill these people. We should not kill. They are our own family members. If I so actually that's what is today's topic actually. That he says that if we slay such aggressors, it is not proper for us to kill the sons of Dhritarashtra and our friends. It's not proper to kill our family members. Why should we gain? Or what should we gain, O Krishna, husband of goddess of fortune? And how could we be happy by killing our own kinsmen? This is today's verse. We'll go through it and we'll see first from Arjuna's point of view, what are his reasons that he doesn't want to fight? Papam evasrayed asman hatvetan atatai sorry atatayanah tasmanarh vayam hantum dhartarashtrans bandhava swajanam hi katham hatva sukinah shama madhava. Sukinah shama madhava means what happiness are we going to get, O Krishna? Okay. Sin will overcome us if we slay such aggressors. Therefore, it is not proper for us to kill the sons of Dhritarashtra and our friends. What should we gain? O Krishna, son, husband of goddess of fortune, and how could we be happy by killing our own kinsmen? So he has a very good question actually. Why to kill our own family members? In today's situation, we also see this saying that if uh, if a person is to be killed or something, then, or let's say if a war is to happen, a battle is to happen, then people will ask, first negotiate, give a chance for peace. Don't just go for killing, right? But in this war, before this Mahabharata was spoken, all negotiations were done. Many negotiations happened. For final negotiation, Lord Krishna himself went, and the demand was reduced from a big kingdom to 5 villages. But Duryodhan rejected that too. And he said, I won't give up land which is equal to a tip of a needle. And therefore, this war has been fought. In today's case, it would have been like a court case. In that times, the courts were the battlefields. The battlefields were the final court where you just fight it out and defeat the other party and become the winner. That's how in the bygone ages things were done. But in today's age, within a country and all, we cannot have wars. We simply go to judge, High Court, district court, high court, or Supreme Court. Okay, we have this. We had this land dispute in Ayodhya, Ram Janmabhoomi, which went on for like 50 years. Ultimately, the Supreme Court gave the order, right? So this is how in today's world we are resolving conflicts. In those age, in the Vedic times, there were negotiations, and if negotiations failed, then there will be war. In today's scenario, we will see that wars will happen even if negotiations fail between two countries. So at the level of countries, if negotiation fails, then we will see war will happen. And that's what we see in India, that India is always fearing that there will be a two-side war from both the neighbors in the north. So it is preparing for that. It is amassing so many weapons and all, because there is no negotiations happening, or negotiations are failing. But still, from Arjuna's point of view, all negotiations failed, but still I don't want to kill them. They are my family members. The word that he uses, swajanam. Swajanam, kinsmen. They're my family members. We don't want to kill them. Right? So even at the time of war, he's thinking like this. Now we'll read the purport. There are a few things that are interesting. The Shastras, the scriptures, they are like the law books. Okay, today we have Indian judicial system. Every country has a judicial system, and the laws are pretty much the same. There'll be some differences among the countries, within their laws. In the Vedic times, the Vedic text were giving these kind of laws. So one of them is in the start. According to Vedic injunctions, there are 6 kind of aggressors: a poison giver, one who sets fire to house, one who attacks with deadly weapons, one who plunders riches, one who occupies another's land, and one who kidnaps a wife. Such aggressors are at once to be killed, and no sin is incurred by killing such aggressors. So in the Vedic Shastra, it is written that these 6 type of aggressors, criminal people, can be killed, can be given capital punishment. You see? So, and there is no sin, there is no reaction to it. They can be killed. In today's world, all these 6 items won't get a capital punishment. Very rarely they'll get capital punishment. But let's say 100 years ago, there was capital punishment. But recently, they have, very few get capital punishment. They'll get just life sentences. So it is serious crimes. These are serious crimes. Poison. You poison a person, you set fire to his house, arson, and attack with deadly weapons and kill the person. Such attackers are there. One who plunders riches, basically stealing, thievery. One who occupies another land. Interesting. One who occupies another's land. This is a very common thing, right, in India. But according to the Vedic injunction, it's a very big crime. In India, this court case keeps going. Occupies another land, right? This if we fight in a court, it will go on for decades. Kidnaps a wife, serious offense. So such killings of aggressor is quite befitting any ordinary man. So in the Vedic times, even an ordinary man could kill. But they would not senselessly kill. That is very important. They would just follow the Vedic injunctions, and according to that, they would act. So Arjuna was not an ordinary person. He was saintly by nature, and therefore he wanted to deal with them in saintliness. This kind of saintliness, however, is not for Kshatriya. The interesting thing is, he was a fighter. He was a fighter, and at the same time, he was saintly person also. He was a devotee. He was a very religious person. dharmic person, saintly person. So he was thinking from saintly behavior, let's forgive them and let's not fight. Hmm? In today's world, it would sound very nice. Even 5,000 years ago, it sounded very nice. Till this part of the Bhagavad Gita, it sounds very nice. Oh, this is against war. So very nice. It's a good thing. Why he was thinking like this? Because the Shastras, they give many instructions. They say, oh, you can kill these kind of aggressors. Then it says that if you get a chance to forgive, forgive. Forgiveness is the highest virtue, is the highest thing. So when we have conflicting statements, which one to follow? So from Artha Shastra, there is one Shastra which is called Artha Shastra. This statement comes. If it's an aggressor, kill it. But from Dharma Shastra, this statement comes that on religious and saintly behavior, you can forgive them. Getting? So now the question is, this one is saying to kill and this one says to forgive. And they are from the same Vedas. So how to understand what is to be done? So let me ask you a question. How to understand this same situation? These are people who had poisoned, who had plundered riches, they had kidnapped Draupadi's wife, Draupadi, and they've insulted her, and they deserve to be killed. But Arjuna is saying, no, we have to forgive them. So now, what is your opinion? Any thoughts?
For I think so. So you said that there are Arthashastra and Dharmashastra. So out of them, whichever is higher, or whichever is more,
So Dharma Shastra is higher.
I think then Arjuna should follow the Dharmashastra.
So that's why Arjuna gives this kind of reason, that on the religious and saintly behavior, we should follow Dharma Shastra. Okay. So from Arjuna's point of view, he's right. But we will read. Okay. We will read and we'll understand what is the problem with Arjuna doing that thing. In simple words, let's say a policeman sees his brother committing a crime. Okay. And now the policeman has to act. And he has to use his deadly weapon, whatever it may be, like a gun or something. Now you tell me what he has to do, what the policeman has to do. See, the same shastras applied to him also. There is Artha Shastra, Dharma Shastra. Okay. So he also has his laws. He has laws from whatever he has learned from police, the Indian judicial system. It says that in case of a crime which is turning to be deadly, use deadly force is allowed. Use of deadly force is allowed. And second is, from a saintly behavior, you can forgive. Now you tell me what the policeman should do when he sees a crime happening and he sees his own brother doing that crime.
Yeah, so here I think it sounds like policeman should follow the Arthashastra.
Why? But Dharma Shastra is greater than Artha Shastra. Why?
Yeah, that's what I am also confused.
Yeah.
Because
So the point is, we will read it, and the point is that what is our position? What is our qualification? Depending on that, we should do. Okay. So if Arjuna is saintly, but at the same time, he's a king also. At the same time, he's a fighter also. So he has to act, right? And he has to punish. And we will see examples. Okay. Although a responsible man in administration of a state is required to be saintly, he should not be cowardly. Okay. Example is Lord Ram. He was so saintly that people even now are anxious to live in the kingdom of Ram Rajya. But Lord Ram never showed any cowardice. Ravana was an aggressor against Ram because Ravana kidnapped Rama's wife, Sita. But Lord Ram gave him sufficient lessons unparalleled in the history of the world. So, what was his position? Arjuna's position was a Kshatriya, one who has to protect. And he has to forgive in a very rare condition. And most of the time, he has to maintain justice. Getting?
Yes, oh, yes.
Yeah. So that's the point. That he was a Kshatriya, and for Kshatriya, such a thing doesn't look good. Okay. If the president of India commutes the sentence, dismisses the sentence, it is fine. But the court, the judge, the policeman, the advocate, they have to act with Arthashastra. And then the president will think, whether to give clemency or not, right? And then he also can act differently. He may say, I don't want to give. I don't think you should be deserved, clemency. You should be hanged. You're getting? So technically one should perform his duty. Okay, everyone is in certain position. Whatever in our company, we may be worker, engineer, director, VP. We have to perform our duty. We may be, prime minister, president. We have to perform our duty. That is foremost. Okay. So further also we will see many explanations why Arjuna's stand of being saintly, then being, king, was not appreciated. Okay, we will see that. So it is not required that we should be always saintly. Lord Ram, who is the most saintliest person, supreme person, still he punished Ravana. Okay. Okay, let's read further. There'll be many more points coming. In Arjuna's case, however, one should consider the special type of aggressors, namely his own grandfather, his teacher, friends, sons, grandson, etc. Because of them, Arjuna thought that he should not take a severe step necessary against ordinary aggressors. So, because these aggressors are my own family members, I think I should not fight. That was Arjuna's thought process. Why he used this word, na swajanam. Swajanam means he's thinking these are my people and my family members, so I don't want to kill them. So from that point he was thinking. Okay, so that is out of family attachment. So he was thinking from a case of family attachment. Like again, the policeman is seeing his brother committing a crime. He thinks, he's my elder brother or he's my younger brother. Let it be. This time I will just forgive him. This is how Arjuna is thinking. And Arjuna's duty is that he should fight. He should protect the weak from the evil. So duty is important. It should be detached from family attachment. But Arjuna is saying swajanam, swajanam. Actually, many times he is going to say the same word, swajanam, swajanam. My family members, my family members. So that is the problem, that he's forgiving based on family attachment. Now I was talking about, President of India forgiving. He may forgive a person, a criminal who is not related to him. That can happen, right? And that is what mostly happens actually. So he is given that power at that point, the president of India, or actually it's many presidents all over the world, they have this thing that they can forgive. But it should not be on the basis of family attachment. That is what we need to understand. He did not, however, consider that such killing profitable simply for matter of temporary bodily happiness. After all, kingdoms and pleasures derived from them are not permanent. So why should he risk his life and an eternal salvation by killing his own kinsman? Arjuna's addressing of Krishna as Madhava, or the husband of goddess of fortune, is also significant in this connection. He wanted to point out to Krishna that as the husband of goddess of fortune, he should not induce Arjuna to take up matter which would ultimately bring about misfortune. So he called Krishna as Madhava. Madhava means one who is husband of goddess of fortune. And here by killing we will get misfortune. So he's Krishna. So he's telling Krishna uh, that he doesn't want to fight to bring misfortune. Krishna, however, never brought misfortune to anyone, to say nothing to his devotee. यदि अपि एते न पश्यन्ति लोभोपहत चेतसः कुलक्षये कृतं दोषं मित्रद्रोहे च पातकं कथम ने ज्ञानम अस्माभिः पापद अस्मान् निवर्तितुं कुल कुलक्षये कृतं दोषं प्रवेशभिर् जनार्दन. Oh, Janardhan. Janardhan is Krishna's another name. Although these men with their hearts overtaken by greed see no fault in killing one's family members or quarreling with them, why should we, who can see the crime and destroying a family, engage in these acts of sin? Now, out of family attachment, he's thinking this way. They may be motivated by greed. That's why they have come to here to fight. But why we should be motivated by greed and then fight? This is how Arjuna is thinking. Let's see. There's one line that comes here which is interesting. A Kshatriya is not supposed to refuse the battle or gamble when he's invited by some rival party. So a Kshatriya, a fighter, should not refuse to fight. Under such obligation, Arjuna could not refuse to fight because he has been challenged by the party of Duryodhana. In this connection, Arjuna considered that the other party may be blind to the effects of such a challenge. That they may not care what happens next. Meaning, after killing so many people, they won't care for the for the result that is going to happen, the after effects. They're not caring for it. So the other party is not caring for it. Arjuna is saying, but Arjuna is saying, I am caring for it because I see evil consequences. However, could see the evil consequences and could not accept the challenge. So obligation is actually binding when the effect is good, but when the effect is otherwise, then no one can be bound. Considering all these pros and cons, Arjuna decided not to fight. So this is what was his thought process. He was saying, I'm obliged to fight because I Kshatriya, he has challenged me, so I have to fight. But the result is going to be disastrous. Therefore, I think I should not fight. But so this is one of the sorry, yeah. Where is my yeah? So this is one of the statement that one should consider. Obligation is actually binding when the effect is good, but when the effect is otherwise, then no one can be bound. Meaning we should consider it obligated if the effect is good. Like, let's say there's an accident on the road. Now, the person who met with the accident may not be our family member, and we are just simply passing by, we feel obliged to save that person, to do something for that person. Why? Because we know if we do something, then his life will be saved. Therefore, we feel obliged. So the result is good. Therefore, we feel obliged. But let's say it's some completely different scenario where the result is not that good. Then we won't care, right? We won't care for that. So considering all these pros and cons, Arjuna decided not to fight. Now, what is the problem with this? How to understand? Okay, obligation is there, but it is not there. In Arjuna's case, what is the problem in considering this obligation? The problem is the effect is bad, right? After a war, the effect is bad. But the effect is actually good in this war. Why? Because Duryodhan was not a great person. He was an evil person. So to kill the evil, we have to take another evil. We have to do another evil. Just like to pull out a thorn, we need another thorn. So to get rid of Duryodhan, there was no other way. His father, king, couldn't kick him out of the kingdom. He was so attached. His Dhritarashtra was so attached to his position and to his son. All evil plans that Duryodhan hacked was known by Dhritarashtra. This is a very interesting point. Dhritarashtra knew that the Pandavas are being that certain evil plans are going on, but he didn't kick out Duryodhan. His own brother, Dhritarashtra's brother Vidura, would keep telling him that this Duryodhan is actually very irreligious person. Though he doesn't deserve to be a king. Kick him out. Right from his birth, he kept saying. But Dhritarashtra said, no, he's my son. He's my good son. I love him very much. I cannot do this thing. So now the only way to get rid of Duryodhan was to fight it out and get rid of him. Sometimes the criminal becomes so bad that the only way to get him out is to kill him in an encounter. So such was the thing with Duryodhan. That encounter was this war. And it had to be done. So therefore Arjuna was thinking that, so he forgot that Duryodhan was evil. That was his problem. And therefore the whole definition changed for him of obligation. He only saw the effect is bad for everybody, for myself, because I will lose my own family members. Now the next point is that he's seeing, oh, all the people will die. So then in the kingdom, there won't be elders. So if elders are not there, who will guide the youth? If youth are not guided, then religion will fall. They'll become irreligious. What will happen to the women? They will be exploited. Then we will get a population which is not religious. Varna Sankara. It is not religious. It is not ethical. It is not dharmic. So therefore, the effect is very bad of all this war. But he forgot that he was not fighting against a saintly person, but an evil person, Duryodhan. It is just like World War II. There is this evil guy, Hitler. And if somebody thinks that, oh, after this war, so many people will be killed. But the only way to get the Hitler out was that you had to fight with him. And therefore, this statement is true. Okay, the statement is true, but the understanding of this statement was completely wrong. Arjuna should have thought like the effect is good if we get rid of Duryodhan, the evil Duryodhan. The effect is good if we get rid of the evil Hitler. Therefore, it is our obligation to fight. But he was thinking like this: oh, the effect is bad because I am losing my family members, my kingsmen, the people in the kingdom are going to die. Therefore, I don't want to die. Therefore, I don't want to fight. This is how Arjuna was thinking. So that is the shortcoming in his thinking. Okay. Any question on this part?
No, Prabhu.
Okay. So first thing was that he said, I don't want to fight because I'm losing my own family members, especially my grandfather, my teacher. Okay. That was his biggest concern. Second is, as a king, he was always thinking about his kingdom, people, administration, welfare of the people. So a war doesn't, um, it actually, it kills so many people, right? General people also it kills. So from that point of view also he's thinking. Now in the next few verses he's going to say the same thing. Kulashaye pranashanti kula dharma sanatanaha dharme naste kulam krishnam adharmo vibhavati uta. With the destruction of dynasty, the eternal family tradition is vanquished, and thus the rest of the family becomes involved in irreligion. Okay, we will see this in this way. You are able to see this, or should I zoom? Zoom in. Okay. Yeah, this is much better. So what he's thinking, he's going to say 4 verses, and that the whole information is there. So he whatever he's thinking is very right, but let's understand his thought process. First is saying Kulashaya, destruction of dynasty. So many people will die, right? So that dynasty is dead. If men die, who will take over the dynasty, right? So dynasty is dead. When dynasty is dead, Parashanti Kula Dharma, family traditions stop. Family traditions. What are family traditions? Family traditions are like, they are good things. Good things taught in a family from generations. They will stop. If all the families stop, basically there will be irreligion everywhere. Adharma abhivavati. There will be irreligion everywhere. Good traditions are not there, then there won't be any tradition. And mostly there will be bad tradition. So that is irreligion. Pradushanti kulastriya. Women will become polluted. Women will become polluted means they won't have good husbands. They will be exploited. And children will born from such union. They will be Varna Sankara. Varna Sankara means unwanted progeny. Unwanted progeny means what? Unwanted progeny means children who are not moral and ethical. So, a child is an image of father and mother, right? The child will show qualities the way the father and the mother are showing. Okay. And the tradition and the family tradition that he's coming through, the upbringing and all that. So if upbringing is bad, parents are also not bad. Parents also not good. Then what is the child going to come? Mostly the child will be not moral, not ethical. So this is his conclusion. And when they won't be moral and ethical, what will happen is naraka. It will be hellish life. Hellish life means all the tradition and the family will be destroyed. Patanti pitaro. So Vedic systems is that you can offer pious things to your dead grandfather and forefathers who have fallen down. That will stop because people won't be religious. Utsante jati dharma kula dharma. Community projects will stop. Family welfare activities are destroyed. So community projects will also be stopped because there will be no elders, right, teaching the youth that we should be generous. If you leave the youth on its own, the youth only wants to think about themselves, selfish desire. So You see, if there are no elders, there is nobody controlling them or advising them, suggesting them. The youth is only going to think about their own enjoyment. So they won't do any family welfare activities. There won't be any community projects. And all of this is happening because we are having this war. So Arjuna is making this very nice argument here that the destruction is too big. And he's explaining what it all means. The future is basically lost because of this. He's concluding that way. Okay. So few verses he's going to say that. Let's get into the purports. But just before that, this is something what happens after a war. After a war in certain places, like after World War II, same thing happened. Dynasties were destroyed. Family tradition stops because there's nobody in the family now. Irreligion increased. And then women become polluted. The children that came were, not moral nor ethical. They were having their own, selfish attitudes. So therefore, war has all these bad effects. And Arjuna knew this. And if you study what happened after World War II, World War I, you will see same reasons, similar reasons. How family tradition stopped, the next generation that came were not so religious. They were having their own ideas, and those ideas were not helpful. And then a full generation is lost. And after that, that whole country, came down. You can see this. You can see, what happened after Japan, after the war in Japan, after the war in Germany, after the war in all the countries that took part. So what Arjuna is thinking is very is actually very right. These are the effects of war. Whether you do the war for a right cause or for the wrong cause, these effects are going to be there. So thinking all this, he's saying, I don't want to fight. So do you agree with Arjuna? These are his next set of reasons. What do you think of these reasons?
Yeah, I think these reasons are really valid reasons.
Yeah. So these reasons are valid. But after hearing the Bhagavad Gita, the war anyway happens and Arjuna fights. He doesn't stop fighting. Now, why? Even though these reasons are going to be there, Arjuna fought. What is the greater reason of fighting then? Even if we get this kind of result, what is the greater reason of fighting? Again, it boils down the same thing. Where it is. This fellow. It all boils down to this guy, Duryodhana. If he transformed from a bad person to a good person, the war was not needed. It all boils down to this person, Ravana, aggressor. If he didn't transform at all, but if he had done, then that war wouldn't have happened. Right? In the same way, World War II, Hitler. If Hitler didn't stop, or he was so evil, he was killing people just based on their religion, huh? Without any cause, just mass killing. So to stop them, you have to have war, because all negotiations have failed. Getting? So that is the reason why the war should happen. The result will come, because the war is happening, the result will come, but the effect is still good. Why? Because there are two things. One thing is, this person is evil, Duryodhana is evil. Okay, Duryodhana is evil, and second thing is, he was doing evil things. So now we need to stop that evil activity. Okay, we need to stop that evil activity. For that, we need to have war. After the war, some bad results will come, but it is not going to be forever. Now suppose this war doesn't happen, and this evil Duryodhana was still living, so he will continue doing it, right? Next 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, 50 years. Suppose Hitler was living till today, what he would have done? He would have brought more misery all over the world, na? Getting? Now suppose um, you know there's somebody gets hurt in the leg, and he doesn't treat it. Now it becomes gangrene. Okay, once it becomes gangrene, then what is the solution the doctors do?
Cut it.
So it's decomposed. That part is decomposed. So what is the best treatment? They may try this, antibiotics and all that. They may remove it, the dead tissue, or they'll just remove that part. Suppose that whole leg, they will remove it. Why? What is the it's making a person disabled, right? But why to do that? Why a doctor will do that, and he will say, I did that because it will save your life? What is the problem with that whole thing, gangrene? The gangrene will spread all over the body, and it will cause the death of a person. So if we cut it, that part, then basically it won't spread only, right? So Duryodhana was that gangrene, so he had to be cut. Otherwise he would destroy everything that would come in its path. Okay. Okay, so did we read this? Kulashay Pranashanti, or we are in the previous one only? Okay, we completed this obligation. Okay. Kulashay Pranashanti Kula Dharma Sanatana.
This is also we read.
Yeah, that's we read. Okay, this one we have to read. Huh? Okay.
Yeah, perfect.
Purport we have to read. Okay. In the system of Varnashram institution, there are many principles of religious traditions to help members of the family grow properly and attain spiritual values. The elder members are responsible for purifying the processes in the family, beginning from birth to death. See, the elder people, they install the traditions, and they install in the younger people, and when the young people old and elder, they continue that, and that is necessary for the family to grow and to attain spiritual value. Even to attain material prosperity, that is necessary. But on the death of the elder members, such family traditions of purification may stop, because youth are not going to listen. They will say, we don't know. Or even if they know, they'll say, I don't want to do. So the elders, they would forcibly do it to youth who is not listening. And the remaining younger family members may develop irreligious habits and thereby lose their chance of spiritual salvation. See, there are many examples in our society where elder person dies. especially the father dies. And many a times we see that the his children, they actually yeah, they actually become more irreligious, more irresponsible. Getting? Because there is nobody to tell them. And the society says, what can we do there? His father is not there. So we see in our own experience, right? Therefore, for no purpose should the family elders or the family members be slain. Therefore, he thinks that elder members should be spared, should not be forfeit. Okay. From his perspective, he's thinking very interesting point. Okay, 40th verse. Adharma bhivavat Krishna pradushanti kulastriya Srishu dushtashu varshneya jayate varna sankaraha. When irreligion is prominent in the family, the women of the family become polluted, and from the degradation of womanhood, or descendants of Vishnu come unwanted progeny. Good population in this human society is the basic principle for peace, prosperity, and spiritual progress in life. Good population. Good population means what? Healthy? Healthy population? Does good population means healthy population? What does it mean? What do you think? Just good population. What does good population means? Any thought?
Not sure, Prabhu.
Yeah.
Or we can say it's religious population, or there is
Yes.
some concept
Yes.
of religion is there.
Yeah. Instead of religious, let's put it like this, because see, the good population word is used, right? Basically, it means population with good qualities. And it would mean material and spiritual. And this would cover everything. Health, wisdom, spiritual values, religious, mature, ethical, moral. This covers both things. So this is what means by good population. Okay, the Varnashram system would maintain this good population. If one follows the Varnashram system, one maintains this good population. After World War II, so many German children, they didn't have father. Do you think everyone got successful in their life? What do you say? Now, so much of killing is going on in Kashmir. Do you think that the family where the father is lost, what will happen to that family?
Yeah, right. So
Yeah.
they don't get the proper guidance, even in the material platform or spiritual platform.
Both.
They don't get the right advices and all. So we go to the wrong
it
direction.
is only very few children who actually still remain good even when their father dies or something. Elder people die. It's not the case with every children. It is found most of the time that basically the child is misled or is not able to achieve his full potential, his or her full potential. So
what about the mother? Mother is there, no? Mother is also there. So
see, mother is there, but the mother also has to be strong, no? If they listen to the mother, then it's fine. But most of the time, it doesn't happen that way.
right.
Yeah. See, if mother is not there, sorry, the father is not there. At least if the grandfather is there or the uncle is there, right? So if they can listen to them, it's fine. But in this case, what is happening is uncle, father, everybody is present on the battlefield. And Arjuna is getting headache. He is saying everybody is here. All elders are here. It is not like 50% is still there at the home. No, everyone is here. So all of them are going to be killed. Now I don't want this war. That was his bigger problem. Okay. So, yeah. Let's try to finish this purport. The Varnashram religious principle is so designed that the good population will prevail in the society for general spiritual progress of state and community. Now, I will talk more about this once we finish this, then I will tell you some more details. Such population depends on the chastity and faithfulness of its womanhood. Okay, we'll take few sentences from here and I will explain more. As children are very prone to be misled, women are similarly prone to be degradation. Therefore, both children and women require protection by the elder members of the family. They require protection, they require guidance because they can be easily misled. To mislead a woman is not a very complicated thing, right? You can easily mislead. It's easy to fool them. Somebody says on the road, I love you, and they start thinking, yes, this person loves me. He thinks that I will get stars from the sky, and the woman actually thinks that yes, he will do that. Right? They can be easily misled. And same thing with children also. They can also be fooled. Okay? We know that children can be fooled. But women, yes, they can also be. So much cheating happens. So therefore they need protection. Therefore they need guidance. By being engaged in various religious practices, women will not be misled into adultery. According to Chanakya Pandit, women are generally not very intelligent and therefore not trustworthy. So the different family traditions of religious activities should always engage them. And thus the chastity and devotion will give birth to good population eligible for participating in Varnashram system. Okay, so if they are guided and protected to good family traditions, then through them, the child that will come, they will teach good things to their children, right? Okay, I'll tell you one point. On the failure of such Varnashram dharma, naturally the woman will become free to act and mix with men, and thus adultery is indulged. Okay, if the Varnashram system is not there, then there will be adultery. And there is a risk of unwanted population. The mixing of man and woman, where the man is completely unqualified. So the child will come out to be unqualified. Irresponsible men will also provoke adultery in the society, and thus unwanted children flood the human race at the risk of war and pestilence. So unwanted children means what? Unwanted children means the same thing, meaning bad quality child. The children who don't have good qualities within them. Okay, so now these are very interesting points. So there are few things that I need to tell. So first thing is, every person is born with some qualities, right? Some qualities he is born with. Then he gets few qualities with upbringing. Okay, how a person is brought in a family and all that. Let's put like, family traditions and environment in the family. Getting? So two things. Person, he is born with qualities and he gets few good qualities. So whatever, good, bad qualities with upbringing. Getting? Whatever it may be, family traditions, environment, schooling, where he lives, place where he lives, food that he eats. Depending on that, the nature of a person develops. Do you agree with this?
Right, exactly.
Yeah. So how a person is brought up in a family, he will have that kind of qualities with him. Lakshana. It's called Lakshana. And he's born also with some qualities. You will see a child with particular quality right from a child, toddler or something. You can see nobody taught him, but he has this kind of attitude with him, reserved attitude or extrovert or introvert, right? So these are born with him. Then something with happens with the family. If the family is say business oriented, then the child will pick up all business qualities. If the family is say Brahmanical oriented, the child will become like a Brahmanical person. So two ways this come. Now, how do they happen? Now let's talk about first thing. How is born with the qualities? How that happens is because the person is actually a soul. He comes with his past karma. Okay. Now, depending on his past karma, he gets particular father and mother. Father and mother, one gets depending on past karma. Now, how do father and mother get a particular son or a daughter? It depends on their mind and consciousness at the time of intercourse. Now, this is Vedic science. It says that when there is sexual intercourse between husband and wife, depending on their mind, what is the state of their mind and what is the consciousness they are having, they will get a particular person, a son or a daughter with certain qualities, predetermined qualities, depending on the mind and consciousness. So if their mind and consciousness is pure, is good, they are definitely going to get good children, because this is how the nature of a child is what to say, decided or something, is acquired, because it depends on the nature, the mind and consciousness of the father and mother also. So therefore, if both are religious, they are bound to have a religious son or a religious daughter. But if both are of bad qualities, you are going to have something really bad output of it. So that's why it says that the woman should be engaged in religious activity so that they are pure, and the men should also be engaged in religious activity so that they are also pure. Pure in sense they are not acquiring bad qualities. Okay. So to get good population, you need a good father and a good mother, both. And now here Arjuna is seeing that all the fathers are dead. Then what will happen to the women? They will free to act and mix with other men. And what other men will do? They will have illicit relationship with them, and then we'll get an unwanted population which nobody wants to take care. And this unwanted population will flood the human race. That is what Arjuna is thinking. Getting? Okay, so we are 5 minutes past 2, so we can stop now. Any questions or comments?
No, Prabhu. Was
Okay.
nice.